new media outlet, and the challenge were to get the skills, to get the people who can actually deliver to the standard the public and the owners, the practitioners would have expected. So I'll say, having been in the media for like 13 years now, I see we're making some good progress. Don't see a systematic way of actually addressing the challenges of skills, for instance.
You mentioned state control. That's what's happened in the past. State has been controlling the media industry. Do you think it's letting go of that, or do you think it still clinches on control of the industry?
Yeah, well, there are private operators, but still the government still owns some media outlets. And the ideal situation would have liked it to be that we have the public media rather than government-owned media. So the likes of Daily News, Hulu, the TBC, would like them to go to the step of taking the approach of BBC, for instance, becoming a public media rather than being part of the government.
But if I may just jump in, it's not just control in terms of ownership of media, it's also control in terms of trying to make publishers and media owners toe a particular line. We've seen attempts in this market to suspend newspapers and shut down others completely if they are perceived to be towing a different or pushing a different agenda than the government is happy with. So there's still a lot of attempts to control the media, to get him to toe a particular line.
I think also what we have seen as the transition, as the development change, is the fact that with the coming of the liberalized media, with the coming of the liberalization of the sector, we have seen access, public access, viewpoints flowing more freely now. I think if I go back to the days when we had a government charter, Daily News had a government charter, we had Shihata, we had Radio Tanzania, literally the government talked down to the people, and mostly people listened and did.
Information was one way.
Exactly, literally one way. There was a bit of flow back, but it was not that much. But now there is a lot of feedback, there's a lot of flow back, and it is for me that should grow, because that's what we are working on. That's what democracy is all about. If there is more feedback this way, and the government probably, I can assure you, is listening very carefully, because you can see some of the things happening because of that public pressure.
There is also, Frank, a greater diversity, much more than just access, a greater diversity of information by dint of the growth of media. You have more titles now, not just in Tanzania but within the East African region, more titles than you had when our countries were gaining political independence. And that has brought in opportunities for growth of a real diverse and a wide range of information, which is good for the citizens, because then they can choose and pick what to use to help them in their decision making.
Okay. You talked about government powers of the government, the Ministry of Information having the powers to shut down media houses. To my understanding, part author of. You mentioned the excessive powers of the government that to shut down media houses when it deems fit in the name of state security, which can be debatable. This is one of the issues that was raised in the declaration document, which you are part author of. What are the underlying principles of this declaration, and how can they be implemented in working programs? Because it's a very beautiful document. I've gone through it, and but as a blueprint, how is it implementable?
I think in terms of implementation, if we start there, we'll have to speak with our brothers in the industry, in this market, to explore the various ways in which it can be implemented. There are various challenges there. There are suggestions here that one could take up to start moving along the path of implementation. But just going to the issue of principles. Let me first of all say that it's an initiative of the Media Council. It's members of academia and journalists. There are only two foreigners, if you like, non-Tanzanians in that think tank. That's me and a professor of journalism from Uganda. The rest are all Tanzanians from academia. And our mandate was to explore the issues that matter most to journalists, not just in this market, but in the region. Looking essentially at the core values of journalism, which I'm sure my friends will agree with me, would be truth, independence, and most importantly, a concern or appreciation for the likely consequences of the matters that we publish as news or information. So that whatever we put out, we are aware that it may cause harm. So at the back of our minds when we are writing our news stories or generating news stories, we are thinking about how to minimize that harm. So those were the core values. So we translated those into freedom, independence, and responsibility as it relates to our work as editors and as journalists. But we also went beyond that and looked at where the key threats to this freedom, independence, and responsibility are likely to come from. And we identified various sources, likely sources. One is government or state. They are the media owners themselves. They have agendas, or they are political, they are friends of politicians or business interests. Then we looked at big business. We looked at newsrooms themselves and also identified editors as potential threats to the promotion of editorial freedom and independence. We looked at interest groups like religious groups, and also, so we have a whole basket of, if you like, stakeholders who we rely on as our constituents or part of our constituents when we are promoting or selling our news or generating our news, but they are also, on the other hand, a threat because they want a particular agenda promoted in the news. So how do we balance our interest in terms of reaching out to them and their interest in terms of meeting their expectations of a free, independent and responsible press? So that was the underlying sort of argument that went into the compilation of this.
You talked about